gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard Flight 914. Please fasten your seatbelts and observe the no smoking sign. We will take off in 5 minutes. When we're at our cruising altitude, refreshments will be served to you. Our flight will take 37 years. I wish you a pleasant trip. What would you do if you went on a vacation to another city and suddenly found yourself in another country altogether? I guess more adventurous types would even enjoy such a change of plans, but most of us would be confused. Anyway, I bet even the most reckless of adventurers would at least raise an eyebrow if told they'd flown for close to half a century. On July 2, 1955, Pan American Flight 914 made its way from New York to Miami, Florida. It was a fine, sunny day, and 57 passengers on board the plane were looking forward to seeing the warm beaches and palm trees of Florida. The plane took off without trouble, but 3 hours later, when it should have already landed at the destination airport, it was nowhere to be seen. Radars of the control tower in Miami didn't show any approaching aircraft, and no distress signals were received either. When air traffic control contacted the New York tower, they got a perplexing reply. Flight 914 just disappeared from the radars in midair. Everything indicated that the plane was lost. Apart from having vanished from the radars, air traffic control couldn't get through to the pilots with the radio. The DC-4 simply vanished into thin air, leaving no trace of itself or any of the people on board. Investigation was started right away. The flight route took the plane over a part of the Atlantic Ocean, and it seemed that the only explanation of its vanishing was that it crashed somewhere along the way. Rescue teams were deployed, the Coast Guard was scanning the waters, but still no luck. Not a single piece of the lost plane was to be found. Investigators could only shrug their shoulders in dismay. 61 people, passengers plus the crew, just blinked out of existence, along with a huge flying machine. Eventually, although the case was never really solved, there was an official statement that the plane crashed, taking the lives of everyone on board. But despite numerous and understandable questions from the grieving relatives, no one could say what really happened to Flight 914. Until 37 years later, at least. Change of scenery. It's now September 9th, 1992, and we're in Caracas, Venezuela. It's a perfectly normal day for Juan de la Corte, air traffic controller at the Caracas airport. He turned up at work, made some coffee, and took his seat, overlooking flights. He was giving some minor comments on a flight in progress when something weird happened. Seemingly out of nowhere, a new dot appeared on the radar. It was as if an aircraft had just popped up from nothingness, or as if it had been hiding from the radar and now decided to show up. Either way, it was a strange thing to see near a civil airport, and de la Corte checked the reading several times, thinking at first that it was a mistake. It wasn't, though. The readings were correct, and soon he and his colleagues were able to see it with their own eyes. In less than 10 minutes, the culprit showed up in the field of vision. At first, it looked to the air traffic control like an ordinary airplane. But as it got closer, they could see that it was, in fact, a very old DC-4 McDonnell Douglas passenger aircraft. still with propellers instead of modern turbines. Such planes were still in use, but they'd grown obsolete and mostly replaced by more contemporary ones. But that wasn't even the beginning of weird. The real confusion began when the pilot of the mysterious aircraft contacted the tower and asked in English, "Where are we?" As the one in charge at the time, Juan de la Corte replied they were closing in on the Caracas airport and asked where the flight was headed. There was a pause on the other side, and then the pilot answered, "We are Pan Am Flight 914 headed from New York to Miami, Florida, with a crew of 4 and 57 passengers on board." This took the air control completely off guard. What was a Pan Am flight doing 1,100 miles away from its point of destination? And how did it even get there? De la Corte was quick to ask a few more questions to the pilot, and what he heard next baffled him. The pilot said his flight was scheduled to land at the Miami airport at 9:55 a.m. on July 2, 1955. Now it was time for the tower to fall into silence. Before asking anything else, not to make matters worse, air control cleared the plane for landing. De la Corte didn't know what to make of the pilot's words. Perhaps he thought he went insane, but that was irrelevant since there were people on board the mystery airplane. He had to make sure they landed safely, and decided he would ask questions when they did. Ground units were immediately called to assist the plane and the passengers, and it landed without trouble. Having relaxed a little bit, Juan finally decided to ask something that bothered him. "Did you know today is May 21st, 1992? Another pause that ensued told him it was a huge mistake to say that. As the ground crew approached the airplane, the pilot's bewildered voice on the radio said, "What are you talking about?" When De la Corte heard that, he knew he would have to order security guards to go to the plane and escort the passengers and the crew. However, as they were moving towards the aircraft, the pilot did something nobody expected. Juan heard the flight captain's panicking voice saying, "No, stay away! We're leaving now!" And indeed, he started the engines again and, without waiting for takeoff clearance, taxied the plane to the runway. Juan tried to stop him over the radio, telling him he was creating a dangerous situation, but the pilot didn't respond. He simply drove to the runway, accelerated, and took off. For some time, the plane could be seen in the air. Soon, it only appeared as a dot on the radar, and then it vanished again. No words could describe the shock Juan de la Corte and his colleagues at the air control tower were in. They had just seen an old airplane appearing out of nowhere, the pilot telling them he was headed to Miami, and before they could do anything, it flew away again, only to disappear in thin air like it had been a collective hallucination. No trace was found of that plane ever again, and to this day, no one can explain what happened that morning in Caracas. Smell that? Smells kind of fishy, right? I must say, though, there's much dispute about the credibility of this event.
Baffled by the mysterious and unexplained case of Javier, El Único Sobreviviente, a guy who says he woke up in the year 2027 all alone, no one around him due to some sort of event that happened.
Estudiando los apuntes del refugio y he averiguado que conmigo debieron de utilizar una especie de...
Now he has been posting these kind of videos for about a few months now, and to this day, no one has a good explanation to what really is going on. Is this guy a time traveler? Is he proof that we're living in some sort of simulation? Or is it just fake? The thing is, subscribers of his have been asking him to do loads of things and go to different places, and he has done it all.
Ok, Google, ¿qué fecha es hoy?
Es domingo, 3 de octubre de 2027.
So what is really going on here? Right now we're going to be taking a look at his stories and videos, and you're probably going to be mind blown. Are you ready? Let's go. Javier's first videos all happen in Valencia, Spain, and they show him walking in various different places. At the beach, on a shopping mall, at the street, and the list goes on. His subscribers were baffled. How come there was absolutely no one around him, and how is this possible? Is he faking it or not? Now, the first video that Javier posted that baffled absolutely everyone was of him going into a hospital, the one he says he woke up to, absolutely no one around him. This is the video. Javier says he remembers waking up at the hospital with a document next to him, a bracelet, and that's about it. The supposed document from General Hospital Valencia dates February 10th, 2021. It says his name is Javier and he got there unconscious. Still, people did not believe him and told him to go to an airport because an airport is never empty. So he did. Notice how on this video he maintains the original background sound. In other words, there is no one there. You can't hear anyone walking, talking, or anything like that. How the heck is he doing this? Javier then continues to visit different popular places that should be filled with people. He goes to a supermarket and there is no one there. He goes to a police station and there is no one there. He goes to a church. He goes to a pharmacy or a drugstore and there is absolutely no one there. This is when he starts visiting larger and historical places too, and it's completely empty. So this is when people start to get creeped out, and I have to say myself also, I have no idea how he's pulling this off. His comment section was bursting with questions like, how does he have the key and access to all these different places? Why doesn't he visit other cities? And how is he able to post videos on TikTok in 2021 if he is in 2027? Well, some of these questions he was able to answer. In one video, he traveled to Madrid and it was empty. And in another video, he traveled to Barcelona. In another video, he went to a museum in Lorca and it was empty. One of his most intriguing videos is when he travels to a distant city and he finds bunkers and tunnels. People were having difficulties explaining exactly where he was. At one point in this video, people actually start questioning if Javier is indeed in the year of 2027 because they don't recognize this structure in Valencia or any other city in Spain. This is where things really take a turn. At some point, he goes to an underground bunker and he finds a document.
Y he averiguado que conmigo debieron de utilizar una especie de colisionador de partículas.
The document reads, Experiment JESP8827. Javier, you probably don't remember who you are and you probably won't. However, know that we haven't lost connection with you and you will probably understand why in the future. Then the document goes on to explain that he was a time machine experiment from 2027 to 2021, but the experiment failed. He reached 2021, but for some reason time and space did not function as they should, and he was locked in a reality where there are no animals and people around him. It even showed equations and graphics of how time travel supposedly works. By now, he had drawn the attention of mostly every internet community and everyone was talking about this. And for obvious reasons, most YouTube channels, influencers, and internet personalities were trying to debunk these videos. Here are some of the findings. I guess the first question that people started asking themselves was, did he record all this during quarantine? Well, it would be impossible to go into a hospital, a police station, a hotel, with it being completely empty, and he did all those. So the next question is he editing the people out using Photoshop or something like that? Well, a YouTuber went to the trouble of trying to do so, and here is the result.
Getting decent results from this feature is to create a quality mask around the object that you want to remove. You'll then need to track that object by keyframing the mask throughout the whole clip. Now this is somewhat tedious, but you don't want to skimp on this step or you'll get poor.
In this video, this YouTuber explains how to remove a person from his recordings. He did a great job. The thing is, he took hours and hours just to remove one person at a very slow and smooth video that he did with a drone. Nevertheless, he did a great job, and it would explain how Javier is doing this. However, in many of Javier's videos, he's doing fast-moving recordings. In one specific video, he uses a car to leave Valencia, and in this video he drives through miles. There is not a single person in sight. Imagine how many hours, maybe days or even months it would take for him to remove animals, people, everything from this video. I guess the idea of using Photoshop is really good, but I'm not too sure if this is how Javier is pulling this off. There was also YouTube Arquivo K. They went and said that they found out a mistake in one of Javier's videos. Leandro from Arquivo K says that he found a person that was hiding in one of Javier's videos.
Pessoal, esse é o vídeo que eu falei no começo, que é o vídeo exclusivo aí, que eu achei o cara, uma pessoa que não conseguiu se esconder.
He goes on to explain that there's one specific video of Javier's in which there is a person hiding in the background and you are able to see this supposedly through the mirror. I'm gonna play this video and I'm gonna show you guys exactly what Leandro is trying to say. Now pay attention to these two specific pillars. Javier is going to enter the fire department garage and he's going to make a left and he's going to open a glass door. The glass door is actually reflecting the two pillars behind them, and moments before he opens this door, we can supposedly see a person hiding behind one of these pillars. Now Leandro from Arquivo K is pretty sure he found some good evidence, and he says that you can see the person hiding behind one of the pillars not once but twice. If you pay attention right now, you can actually see what appears to be a person hiding behind one of the pillars reflecting in the door's mirror. Now I'm not too sure if Leandro is correct, if this is indeed a person or if it's something else. It's very difficult to say by analyzing just one video and one moment in a reflection. However, if this is indeed a person, this is a good find. there is another YouTuber who made an interesting find. In 2019, Luis Miguel Vega was the only survivor of an accident on Javier Prado Avenue in Valencia. And in this accident, Luis lost 2 of his friends. Some people think that Javier is a form of Luis to overcome the fact that he lost his 2 friends and that he was the only survivor that day. Needless to say, internet users were all over this story, and they were trying to understand, could it be real? Is this really Javier? However, many people left comments saying that Javier's hands do not look at all like Luis Vega's. And that is accurate, but that leaves us with another problem. Many internet users suggested that his hands are not the same throughout his videos. And if you actually take a look, it seems like these internet users are correct. But I'm not too sure. I'll leave that up to you. The problem is, to this day, no one has been able to fully debunk his videos. Some people even asked him, go to a high place so we can see planes, helicopters, an entire city. And he actually visited more than one of these places. There is absolutely nothing. No helicopters, no planes, no cars moving, nothing. So what is really going on here? In your opinion, is Javier really a time traveler from the future? Is he locked in a different or parallel universe? Or maybe is he proof that we live in some sort of simulation? Or is it just a hoax? The thing is, to this day, no one has been able to fully debunk any of his videos. Not only that, no one knows how the heck is he pulling this off if it is fake. So what is really going on here? What is your take? I'm James LaFleur, and you're watching the Impossible channel. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoy this video, subscribe with notifications for more, and I'll see you guys again.
There are numerous cases of alleged time slips and dimensional travel, but some are more mysterious than others. Some of the most famous cases still have experts baffled and continue to intrigue researchers to this day. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at these 3 mysterious cases of time travel. Carol Chase McElney. In 2006, Carol Chase McElney was driving to her home in San Bernardino, California, but had decided to stop off and visit her hometown of Riverside. Carol was left confused when she arrived. The location was right. After all, it was the place where she had spent a lot of time, so she knew it well. But having arrived at the right geographical location, the area was far from how she remembered it. She was unable to locate her childhood home, and the homes of her other family members that she knew so well. The numbers of the houses were still correct, but the numbers she had remembered were now non-existent. In fact, none of the houses in the area looked familiar to her. She decided to go check on the cemetery, where she knew her grandparents were buried, but when she got there, Carol couldn't find their graves. All that remained was a plot of fenced-off overgrown weeds. Carol was confused. Was she really in the right town? She decided to explore some more, and she came across some landmarks that were familiar to her. The local college and middle school were still standing, just as she had remembered them. Carol pulled onto University Avenue, a place that was normally busy with people going out to restaurants, hotels, and other shops, but she found it to be an unkempt, graffiti-covered place, and something about the people there scared her. The residents were not acting normal. They had a sinister way about them, and she didn't feel safe enough to get out of her car. She soon decided to leave her hometown of Riverside and return to Paris. Carol was adamant she had stumbled into a parallel dimension, a dimension which her hometown was a creepier version than the one she was so familiar with. It was an event that shook her up, and one that left her completely confused as to what had happened that day. She would return to Riverside just a few years later to attend the funeral of her father. He was to be buried in the same cemetery as her grandparents. When she arrived, she found herself in the town she knew and loved. She only encountered the riverside of her believed parallel dimension once. Carol's experience has now become one of the most famous cases of dimensional travel. Her story continues to baffle researchers. Lorena Garcia. Lorena Garcia was a well-educated 41-year-old woman. On what seemed to be another normal day in July 2008, Lorena woke up just like any other. As she went about her normal daily routine, she seemed to notice small details that were out of place. She became increasingly aware that something wasn't quite right. She could remember the sheets and pajamas that she went to bed in, but the ones she woke up in were different. She put these details down to confusion and continued to go about her daily routine. She got in her car and drove to the place where she worked. She knew the drive well, as part of her daily routine for the past 20 years. She eventually arrived at the place she had worked at for so long. Upon arriving, her confusion got the better of her once again. She walked to the department where she worked, only to find that it was no longer there. The location was the same, but the department wasn't. There was a different name tag on the door of the office she had worked from, and to make things appear stranger, she met her boss. But this boss was someone she could never recall meeting before. She decided to check the personal information on her credit cards, driver's license, and work ID. These all seemed to confirm what she thought. They showed the same name, same picture, same numbers, and same home address. Confused as to what was going on, Lorena decided it was best to take a sick day and head home. When she arrived, she found the man with whom she had separated 6 months ago was in her house. He was acting strange, like the separation had never happened, and like the two were still together. The person she had been in a relationship with for the past 4 months was nowhere to be seen. She hired a private detective, eager to know where he had gone, but his whereabouts remained a mystery. No trace of him or his family could be identified, and there was no sign of him at the place where Lorena knew he lived. Lorena Garcia's case is another of the most famous examples of alleged travel to an alternate dimension. Lorena, however, was unable to travel back to the previous dimension. She believed she woke up here and is unable to go back to her previous life. Though some skeptics believe her experiences are due to a neurological malfunction, Lorena firmly believes she has travelled to another dimension of existence. The Four Girls and the Canyon. Four girls had spent their Saturday at a rodeo in Pioche in May 1972. With the rodeo over, the girls began their journey back to Southern Utah University. Their route home would see them cross the desolate Utah-Nevada state line at approximately 10 p.m. It was here that they came across a peculiar fork in the highway. They decided to take the left turning and head through Gadianton Canyon. As they were driving, they suddenly noticed the black asphalt turn to white cement. The girls thought they must have taken a wrong turning and decided to turn around and head back toward the fork in the highway. As they were heading back, however, they noticed a landscape that they were sure they hadn't passed on the way. They were now driving past grain fields and ponderosa lines. The desert they had been driving through previously had vanished. Confused, the girls decided to ask for help. They came across a roadside tavern and thought it was best to ask a local for directions. This plan was quickly abandoned after one of the girls began screaming hysterically. The girls claimed they had seen 4 egg-shaped vehicles mounted on tricycle wheels with bright lights on top, chasing after them. They hit the road, fast and scared, and the white cement suddenly turned back to the normal black asphalt they had remembered from the desert. They had returned to the desert that they were familiar with, but in the mass confusion, they found themselves wrecking the car in a creek, leaving them with 3 flat tires and with no means of getting help. The 4 girls decided to wait it out until morning before taking a hike to Highway 56, where they had managed to flag down a state trooper. They told the trooper how they had ended up where they had, but the trooper was obviously skeptical and found the whole story to be bizarre. However, their story became even more mysterious when he noticed the tire tracks from the Chevrolet that the girls had been driving had ended suddenly over 200 meters into the desert. How the girls ended up over 3 kilometers north of the highway with no evidence of their journey was baffling. The girls believed they had traveled to another dimension, and just like the others, their story has become one of the most famous cases of dimensional travel. This is probably the most baffling of the cases mentioned, as there were 4 witnesses to the same event. While these events are 3 of the most popular, there are many more cases of people who claim to have experienced a similar sort of thing. But what do you make of these time travel cases? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and help us by growing this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.
possibility of traveling through time has inspired many kinds for many years. The idea of breaking through the linear barrier of time and traveling to any point in history is incredibly fascinating. Though this possibility only exists in science fiction. Or does it? Scientific literature has repeatedly denied the possibility of time travel for many decades. However, there are people throughout the world who wholeheartedly insist that they have successfully traveled through time to various moments in history. Stories like this often cause an audience to be divided. Some people believe that these claims are true and that time travel is entirely possible. However, many other readers claim that the stories are made up of fantasies that were crafted by people who merely wanted attention or fame. In today's video, we would like to reveal a few cases of people who claim to have come from a completely different era in time. Before we begin, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. Let's begin. Sergei Ponomarenko. Back in 2006, a young man named Sergei Ponomarenko was seen traveling down the busy streets of Kiev, the capital city of Ukraine. This man was just 25 years old, though he looked considerably different than everyone else in the city who had been traveling around him. Interestingly, his clothes didn't match the current time at all. Rather, he looked as though he was wearing clothing that had been made many years ago. He looked as though he'd been dressed sometime in the Middle Ages, yet he was wandering around the metropolis streets as though he were just another passerby. The man's appearance only grew stranger when locals began to notice the odd camera he had been tightly holding near his chest. This camera looked to be a relic from a bygone era, yet it was fully functional, and the man seemed to be clinging to it with the utmost security. As people passed him by and traveled down the busy city streets, Sergei looked around, seemingly confused, disoriented, and without direction. It wasn't long before the young man caught the attention of a group of police officers. When they first noticed him, they thought he may have been playing a joke on them. The man approached the officers and asked for directions to an address, though this address had not existed for many years. The police grew suspicious and asked the man to show his identification card. To their surprise, he pulled his ID from his wallet and presented it to them. His ID had expired over 50 years ago. The ID explained that the man was named Sergei Ponomarenko and that he had been born in 1932. If this were correct, the man would have been about 74 years old. However, the youthful man was far from elderly. Police did the best they could to help him, and they directed him to a mental facility, believing he had somehow lost his identity and was now impersonating an elderly man. He was taken in and evaluated by mental health professionals. But what happened next was very strange. rather than reveal to doctors that this was simply an elaborate prank. Sergei insisted that he was telling the truth and that he was born in 1932, though he seemed unaware of how he had arrived in the busy city of Kiev. One of his doctors was an amateur photographer and immediately recognized the camera that Sergei had been using. The device, a Yashima Flex, was one of the oldest portable Japanese cameras ever created. These cameras were remarkably rare, and it seemed odd that Sergei would be walking around in public with such a collectible and valuable camera. As the doctors continued to question him, he insisted that he was born on June 16, 1932 in Kiev. He told doctors he was just 25 years old and had left his home early that morning to take photos in the city. Though as he exited his home, he noticed a strange object flying through the sky. He studied the object for a while and realized it was shaped like a bell. It hovered in the air for a moment, but Sergei quickly became disoriented and found himself in a place he was unfamiliar with. He recalled that the basic features of the area resembled his hometown, though it was much different than it had previously been. He explained that many of the shops and vehicles were unfamiliar to him, leading him to wander the city streets in a confused stupor. The doctors were unfazed by his claims and believed he had simply been suffering from delusions. To prove this, they took his camera and developed the film. After the photos were developed, experts confirmed that the images had been captured in 1958. To take things a step further, Sergei appeared in several of the photos wearing the same clothing he was found in when officers took him to the hospital. Many of the photos showed the streets of Kiev as they were some 50 years ago, though the mystery doesn't end there. As the doctors continued to scan the photos, they noticed something in the background of one of the images that appeared to be floating in the sky. To their surprise, it was none other than the bell-shaped object that Sergei had been telling them about. That evening, Sergei was taken to a holding room and locked inside, while doctors worked to come up with a plan for his treatment. The room was sealed off, and the windows had bars on the outside so that patients could not escape or leap from the windows. To escape a room like this would be theoretically impossible. However, the following morning, Sergei was gone. He didn't leave a shred of evidence behind aside from the photos that the doctors had developed on his behalf. He was never seen again. To take this case a step further, in the year 1960, a man named Sergei Ponomarenko was reported missing by family and friends. He was never found. Alfred Bielek. In 1984, the film The Philadelphia Experiment was released in theaters. The action-packed film takes the audience into the turmoil of the Second World War. At the time, the American government was working on a top-secret project that would combine supernatural elements with real warfare tactics to distract enemy forces and leave them vulnerable to attack. To do this, the Navy developed a new type of technology that would keep their warships from being visible on radar. However, this endeavor led to the ship disappearing completely after a sudden flash of lightning. The ship was found a short time later. The passengers were severely traumatized, claiming to have had a supernatural experience. Some crew members were seriously injured after the incident, while other members of the crew were deemed clinically insane. Alfred Bielek watched the Philadelphia experiment in the 1980s. He was seriously impressed by the film and took a deep interest in the topics that the film had covered. A short time later, fragmented portions of memories began to pop up in the elderly man's mind in a mysterious way. The memories felt more real than they ever had before. The eerie scenes in Alfred Bielek's mind continued to intensify, causing him to feel as though he was losing his mind. He sought help from a medical professional and explained that he was having flashbacks of a troublesome life, though he had never lived through these vivid and traumatizing experiences. As the memories began to piece themselves together, Alfred felt as though he had finally uncovered the truth. He believed he was Edward Cameron, a crew member from the Philadelphia experiment, and that he had been reincarnated after the tragedy. Edward Cameron is said to have witnessed the supernatural series of events firsthand when he was a soldier. Shortly after the mysterious equipment on board the ship was activated, the crew began to panic. To escape the chaos, Edward decided to jump off the ship, though instead of ending up in the water, however, he found himself in a hospital in the year 2137. A little while later, the American woke up in the year 2749. Edward Cameron was allegedly sent by the government on countless other time-traveling adventures before his soul reincarnated into the body of Alfred Bielek. This story is wild, but Alfred claims that he's telling the truth and that all of these events truly happened. Paul Dinock. A Swiss man named Paul Dinock fell into a serious coma in 1921. He remained in the coma for about a year, but when he awoke, he had a vast knowledge of the study of physics. He had never taken schooling for physics, nor had he worked in the field a day in his life. How is it that a seemingly normal man could fall into a coma for a year, then awaken a genius in his newfound field of expertise? Paul claims that when he fell into the coma, his soul was transported into the body of a man named Andrew Northam. Andrew was a physics teacher who lived in the year 3906. He lived a full life as Andrew Northam for a year and learned many events that will soon take place in world history. He says that the world will soon be plagued by overpopulation and famine, as well as climate change. He said that these ideas led many people to break away from the molds of society to form a new spiritual lifestyle. He added that large areas of the world will be destroyed by a future world war, and that the remaining inhabitants of the earth would band together and unite. He concluded his statements by saying that humans will soon be visited by an extraterrestrial race that will help humans continue to survive and thrive, with every resident of the new world having a home and sufficient food, as well as access to endless knowledge. When Paul awoke from his coma and told his story, most of those around him felt as though he was either lying or that all of his claims were simply a dream. Regardless, Paul stuck to his word and found a small following of people who still believe his claims to this day. He passed away 2 years later in 1924. The Man from Taured. The mystery of the Man from Taured has been around since the 1950s. This man appeared in a Japanese airport and was described as a European-looking man who spoke several languages. He claimed to have been from a country known as Taured, and his identification documents confirmed this. Locals couldn't understand what the man was talking about, but he began to grow impatient and explained that Taured had existed for over 1,000 years. He pointed to his country on a map, but was shocked to learn that it was listed as Andorra. Japanese police believed the man was attempting to commit identity fraud, so they arrested him and locked him in a cell. They returned the following morning to continue their interview with him, but he had vanished as quickly as he had arrived. He was never seen again. Which of these stories did you find the most interesting? Do you believe that time travel is possible? Let us know what time you'd like to travel to if you had a time machine.